Velkommen igjen til Kulturhuset her i Tromsø. Vi er kommet til festivaldag nummer 3, og våre gjester i dag representerer en film som vises ved festivalen som har noe veldig spesifikt og originalt og konkret ved seg, akkurat slik som filmer som vises på TIFF skal og burde ha. Og denne samtalen kommer til å foregå på engelsk, and I'm switching to English right now. I'm sitting here with directors Nicholas Bonner and Anja Daelemans. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
But your film that you brought here, I'm very happy we have this poster up here because it's such a nice thing to sort of just take a look at. It's called Comrade Kim Goes Flying. And as I told someone yesterday, it's a North Korean film, and it's probably the very first North Korean film I have ever seen. And this gives the film, just on surface value, it gives it something very original. But I found it to be really like a very interesting genre film as well. And I would like us to go into that later on. But to start off, there might be people here who has not yet seen the film. Could you tell us just quickly, what's the story? What is the film about?
It's a story about a coal miner, a woman coal miner, who lives at the countryside in North Korea, and she dreams of becoming a trapeze artist.
That was very precise. Yeah. And so, as the film opens, it became obvious to me, and I think to the audience in the room, that this film has a lot of warmth, a lot of humor, and a lot of sort of tongue-in-cheek film genre humor. At least that's when I got a couple of big laughs. Because you play with film language, like suddenly gravity is not an issue. Suddenly the face is a film face, like 1,000 more of a face than normal life would offer us. Just to start off, how did you approach telling this story as you did? Not it being in North Korea, but being it as a story like this, like an inspirational sports story of a kind.
I think how it all happened is I've been in North Korea for 20 years and knew Anja in 2002. She came over for the Pyongyang International Film Festival, and we knew that a sort of film with excitement and fun that was pure entertainment would work in North Korea. We had at one time taken film like Bend It Like Beckham. We took that to one of the festivals and seen the audience actually react to it. North Korean films typically are very politically, very heavily loaded. This film we wanted to have, no sex, no violence, just humor, just pure entertainment. So this would be a first for the North Koreans. And it was really, that was the genre that we thought. We both like those sort of romantic comedy style, and it was basically working with North Koreans to see how far we could push it and actually away from their style into something that we all could accept.
Right. And it struck me, obviously, that I just have to ask, how many films are made in North Korea every year to be screened in cinemas in North Korea?
They make, this year they've made there's two big film studios. There's the military studio and there's the public studio. And recently they started having more of an output, about 10 films a year. But during the last sort of 5 years, they were actually down to 2 or 3 a year. Okay. The big heyday was sort of the 80s, and they were really turning them out. Right. But now with they've just this year started really last year, getting into digital filming, and that means that the output's again increasing.
Right, but your film had a very analog feel to it.
Yeah,
at least
we shot in 35 millimeter.
Yes, yeah. And you were 3 directors. The third director is Kim Goes-Flying, not present, a man, and he's a North Korean, right? Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit how it is to work as 3 directors on one film?
It's not easy, but it works.
No, it seems like a challenge.
The big challenge was, in fact, not so the cultural differences, but also the language, because we both speak English, but Goes-Flying speaks only Korean, so it was not that easy to talk about developing characters, developing the story, just with a translator all the time.
Yes.
But it worked out, and we did the whole project all 3 together. Only during shooting, it was the North Korean director who was in charge for guiding and telling the actors, and Nick was on set there. I wasn't.
Okay.
But that's basically, we split it a bit up.
So it's kind of like the Wachowski siblings. They directed The Matrix, And I remember them talking in the bonus material about, one of us handles the people and one handles the stuff, or something like that, they said. And
yeah, with this we had to actually, it even goes even further. This is the first film ever to be edited, one digitally edited, outside North Korea. So it's the first film outside North Korea. We took the North Korean director, and then we went further. That was all done in China. So we had the basis of the story, and then Anja took that over to Belgium and then continued the post-production there, so directing that.
And what degree of trust is necessary on behalf of the North Koreans to let the film travel out into the world?
But we had too many basic principles. I think without having them, it was absolutely impossible. And one of them is trust, and the other one is respect for each other.
And trust is so important for any filmmaker. The relationship to your subject, to your actors, and obviously also to the art and the result itself.
No, absolutely.
When making this film, I guess my prejudice would be that making a film in North Korea like that is for a North Korean audience. How important was it for you that this film was a film for any audience anywhere? I mean, could you adapt to that and actually feel that you were making a film that you truly felt could reach out anywhere? Because when I saw it, I thought, listen, this is a universal film. It's obviously North Korean because it shows me a world I've not seen in a fiction film like that before. But it's also a very, very universal story. Was that important?
Yeah, it was very important. We wanted to make a North Korean movie, but not put too many influence of the European influence in it.
A special European style.
Yeah, so that was something that we did not want to do. But then first, that was the first edit was done in North Korea. Then we watched it. Then we all worked together for 6 weeks in Beijing. So the North Koreans came to Beijing and we all went to Beijing, and Nick lives in Beijing. We worked on that edit over there. And there we had discussions, and there we tried, no, that doesn't work for our audience.
Right.
That doesn't work for our audience.
Right.
So, and it was finding a way in between. And there is always a way finding in between to tell a story. It is universal. Yeah,
and that kind of working out compromises and making sure that the artistic sort of choices stand as firm as possible.
But yeah, that was probably one of the more interesting stages, was the 2 years of pretty hard work in the actual script writing process.
Right.
And then Anja would come over to Beijing, we'd both go to Pyongyang, and we spent a week in this hotel. Many times actually not leaving the hotel, sat in this one room on I think it was the 3rd floor, discussing, and you're trying to come up, like Anja says, it's, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, but that we didn't want to make this Euro pudding, this sort of mishmash of our culture with theirs.
Right.
And in the film, there's one example is the Koreans would come up with these ideas that we couldn't understand, that we knew wouldn't work for a sort of film with an understanding by an international audience, but then suddenly something would work. Like let's have a cement mixing competition. That's one of the big scenes, and to us in the West, cement mixing isn't exactly the biggest sort of build up to a scene. But
I'd say that the charm by cement mixing has definitely disappeared by the arrival of machines. And what's wonderful to see in this film is that it's handy, it's down to earth, and it's a special technique. It's a very wonderful sequence, by the way, of many wonderful sequences.
But as filmmakers, when you read it in a script, then it's going to work.
Yes.
And it's going to be universal, because everybody understands it's not about the cement, it's about the power between the man and a woman at that time. Like, I am the strongest, no, I am the strongest. And that works, and that's the universal language that we tried to find during the whole period.
And it makes telling this story with film makes sense in that regard, because we can all very much relate to just, for example, I would say the aesthetic of faces. It's such a wonderful way that you portray these characters by letting us look at their faces for a significant amount of time, and the way you use close-ups very efficiently. I think it's very, very interesting to also look at the film that way, because I found it to be polished in the sort of the most wonderful way. And I mean it's very positively, like looking at stuff when you were a child. Like, great films for children are also films for adults, because they communicate so wholeheartedly. And finding that tone, How did you approach that? Already on the script stage, or did you realize during casting that we can go even more into these faces or these people?
But we were very lucky to have the face of our main character. When you put her on screen or when you take a photo of her,
this woman.
She immediately has something. So she has it.
Yeah.
For all big shows like X Factor goes, she has it.
Yeah.
So the first moment you see her on screen, you get a feeling like, oh, I want to know what she thinks and I want to follow her. So we were very lucky to have found her during the casting, because the two main characters are not professional actors.
They are not?
No.
I was going to ask you about that.
No, they are professional acrobats.
Right.
So it was for her the first be on big screen ever.
But it's very interesting looking back at old, like silent cinema. You have people like Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton who, with their physical presence, they act out stuff that you could never put in dialogue. Yeah. And I find this also to be a physical performance in the best way possible, because she has this dream, and slowly you realize that her the way she sort of is makes sense.
It like even go up there. Like in the beginning we talked like, what would you do? Try to make an actor fly in the air, or just find a flyer and let them
make
act.
an actress out of her. Yeah.
So there was, but we agreed that it was quite impossible to, if you're up there, need to fly, need to swap. It's impossible for an actor to learn that on a short way.
Yeah.
Maybe if they can train for about years and years, but that we didn't have that time. So
it reminds me of scenes with pianists or violinists in films. If they make the actors themselves learned it.
Yeah.
No,
it's not.
Never.
You feel it, and I'm really think that the audience feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That there is that thing that needs to be there to be real.
And with the cinematography, I mean, it's a North Korean crew.
Right.
But I was the only sort of Westerner there, so it's their way of filming. I mean, we in the West would say, we don't film in that style now. We don't do those close-ups, but that's again part of the charm, and
absolutely,
we kept it there.
Absolutely. I really found watching your film to be like wonderfully anachronistic in film language, and it could be a really inspirational reminder to example like young Norwegian filmmakers. Having watched so many Dardenne brothers films, that the only way to portray realism is to hey, here we go. And your film is strangely, artificial in the way that it's dreamlike. But as you say, casting truthfully towards a trapeze artist, you go for realism, and then the acting is part of that realism. Talking about realism, that's often thought about as sort of a way to approach more politically motivated stories. But this one is a humanistic tale. It's a tale about inspiration and hope. And how was balancing that tone towards a realism? Because you want people to believe the universe that you're portraying, right? But still, it's kind of.
But we wanted to make, from the beginning it was clear that we wanted to make like a fairy tale, like stay away from reality as far as possible. So that's why we also chose those very candy colors.
Right.
That the grass is too green and it's the sky is too blue in the technicolor way, like back in the 50s.
Yeah. So if I think I've seen North Korea through this film, it might be. I don't know. Is it shot on location mostly, or was it studio?
Yeah, it's all on location.
Because it felt very real to me, even though I can recognize that the colors are very vivid, but still.
But it's a surreal place. I mean, just with the architecture in Pyongyang, it's incredible. And the dresses, it tends to have this, again, these pop-out colours that are just waiting there to be. They were almost waiting there to be treated in post, because the girls wear bright, luminescent dresses. The girls have 1,000-volt smiles. It's an unusual. What was quite fun is the camera. The camera that we took over, I think the last time that camera had seen anything was in what was it? In Lord of the Rings. So suddenly the poor camera goes from the Lord of the Rings in that sort of unreal world, and the next minute it appears in Pyongyang. So and I think that to an audience is also fascinating. Is actually what you're seeing on the picture. That's very much part of it.
Yeah. I must ask, I mean, you said you've been to North Korea for 20 years, probably going back and forth, I guess, staying longer periods. And where does this sort of curiosity and interest of North Korea from? For you personally, did you start out with a film project and then you could not find yourself leaving, or?
No, I'm by training a landscape architect, so it's even more bizarre. I ended up in Pyongyang because it was just it was a city that was remodeled after it was flattened in actually in the Korean War in 1953, and then I slowly got into film, documentaries, etc. And then when we met Anja, that was when we decided, this place needs livening up. And for me, perhaps the difference was it was to get a North Korean audience to see some, to actually show them something they could laugh at and cry at. And we showed the film at Christmas to a North Korean audience, and a guy from the culture ministry said, "I've never cried in a film and laughed at the same time. Thank you." And I think for me that was. I think for Anja, maybe it was a different sort of maybe seeing it in having the film at Toronto or here or in South Korea. But to see a North Korean audience come out saying that they bought a ticket, which they did have to buy, and come out feeling that was worth paying for, that for both of us is quite special.
But am I mistaken if I'm sort of thinking back to the early days of cinema in a way? I mean, how used this audience in North Korea, how used to are they to this kind of sort of, all politics removed, humanistic, heartwarming kind of storytelling? Because like Chaplin, we talked about him a little bit earlier. There's also a scene in the film where the character ends up on the ice and sort of like Bambi's around, and you have the audience within the film laughing. And I'm thinking, is that the kind of mood going on when you screen your film in North Korea, or is it?
There are films. I mean, there's a film like Our Flavor, where it's it's a North Korean film, and it has elements of humour where a girl, she takes the Western ways, and the father-in-law comes in and sits on a sofa and bounces off, and instead of drinking soju, drinking champagne, and hates it. And so she eventually, of course, learns that the Korean way is best. So although there are elements in our film, the difference with our film is those other films always have a very strong political agenda, and there's never been a strong girl without a strong man behind her. This is a strong girl on her own, who actually, the man who Jang Phil, who's the nemesis, falls in love with her because she is such an amazing girl. End of story. And we had this interesting argument yesterday with a couple of French people who came to see the film and said it's propaganda. And I can understand that, but if you understand the context of actual North Korean cinema, this is absolutely not that. This is entertainment.
And I guess trying to say something about that from the outside would, at least I would think I would have to sit down and watch all of North Korean cinema and be able to say, what differentiates this from that? What are the other realities? And to me, North Korea is a story on the news, and it's very difficult to try to get a sense of it. But a film like this gives at least a very interesting sense of, like, not daily life, but daily life. Like, what are the people about?
It was very nice when we screened in South Korea. The director of the film festival, Mr. Lee, got on stage for the first screening, and he said to the audience, like, "Thanks for coming, but if you leave all your preconceptions behind, you're just going to see a nice movie when you can have fun with and amuse yourself with it." So this is basically why we made it for. It's to have fun with. You go sit in your chair, grab a little bit of popcorn, and then just enjoy what you see. Everything what you see is also one-on-one. There is no hidden agenda. There is no layers where you have to find what characters think. It's none of that. Just go sit, relax, and enjoy.
I guess what I thought about the most was, when are they going to sing?
That we cut out in the editing room.
The sequel?
You never know.
We actually went to, when we were at Toronto, we actually had a ticket for our own screening, and it said Comrade Kim Goes Swimming, and we thought, oh, bloody hell, that was quick.
Awesome.
Yeah. We had
it's too expensive underwater, so I said no.
Well, I mean, the closest we get to singing actually is the animations that we used, because there was, when we came back and Anja was looking through the film, there were very clearly gaps in the story. So we found an Irish animator, and using North Korean liner cuts, brought those into the story. And that for a North Korean audience was absolutely the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah.
But it added that, if anything, it sort of added that extra emotion that we needed and part of telling the story.
Right.
That was a bit without those animations. For the North Koreans, the story worked because it's their environment and they could understand on another way, in a different way than we understood the story.
Yes.
But for us, it needed a little bit more. On the test screenings, it was like there were gaps and people were, now she's there and then she goes there.
Yeah.
So we really needed to find a solution to make the story go smoothly, that you stayed in the story and not took out.
Well, I think it works very well. I mean, it gives a sort of an extra aesthetic dimension also to the whole.
Yeah, we're very happy with those animations too.
So now that you've screened it here, I know you're going up to Svalbard to screen it there. Must be the northernmost screening of a Northern Korean film ever.
That's good. I like that.
But what's next?
We're going to, after here, we go in 23rd or 24th of January, we go to Rotterdam.
Right.
And after Rotterdam, we go to Gothenburg. And then there are another 10 film festivals coming up, but can't say yet before it's announced by the festival itself.
So the question of reaching an international audience is already answered. And would you like to go back to do another project like this? You think? Or was it? Or did you get full? That was it. Next close country, Myanmar.
This one took about like 6 years to make it.
Right.
So maybe we come back next year.
Yeah.
And
this year
we
you can lean back and sort of enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
Well,
And then you never know what comes up. So.
At least my curiosity is piqued. And I think this festival, I'm sure, would like to welcome another great adventure from either one of you or together. Thank you very much for coming here to Kulturhuset for this Filmprat, as we call it, Film Talks.
Okay.
And have a great time at the festival and good journey up to Svalbard.
Thanks,
Okay.
and it's an amazing festival. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
I
indeed.
totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much also. Bye.
Thank you.
And there's music, and then we go out to the logos.